SDG 15, life on land, that's what we are studying. So some global challenges, if we see this, prevent extinction of flora and fauna on the planet caused by direct effects like destroying habitats and for profit, and indirect effects like climate change. Increase biodiversity by reintroducing ancestral regional species of flora and fauna as well as minimizing monocultures in agriculture and forestry. Reduce impact and insertion of alien species. Well, what is alien species in this context? You may be wondering. It's not that some alien arriving in some flying saucer. That's not what we are discussing over here. The alien species means like any place, like for example, if you are talking about any local place, your native place. So there are native species of plants, animals, birds, reptiles, and insects, etc., etc. Like along with the native humans also, right? Yeah. Like Indian subcontinent, if we see, we are all like native to this place, and for like thousands and lakhs of years, our ancestors, our forefathers, they have lived over there, right? And similarly, the all of those other life forms also of flora and fauna. Okay, so you may call them as like a native to this place, that they are naturally like have made like this place as their habitat, and this is place there where they have been living for like several generations, for all of these hundreds and thousands of years, right? So that becomes a native this thing. Any species which is non-native, that it is coming from some other like a place. For example, in Indian subcontinent, if some species comes from for example South American like a continent, right? So that will become as a like a non-native or alien species. Okay, because conditions here geographic, climatic, weather, all of those things are very unique and different compared to what is what we have in Indian subcontinent, right? So it may fit in or it may not fit in, or it may pose challenges, or it may get threatened by like a local species. Anything can happen. It depends, right? But whatever may happen is not actually going to be like a favorable for either this place or this place, right? Or for that species or for the other like a local species, right? So that's why like this practice is kind of attracts attention to prohibit any such like illegal like transfers of like animal species or plant species, birds, etc., etc., to stop like this alien species is like invasion. Sometimes there are invasive species also. You may be like aware like some like weeds actually came in the like a wheat which was imported from United States of America long back, like several decades earlier, when India used to import its food. Okay, and it got scattered in the whole of the India, and now we are facing like this very strong invasive species which kills like local plants, and which is not good for like a human health also, right? It creates a lot of skin irritation, eye disease, and several like a such like a things. Okay, so this is what like we are discussing over here as an alien species. Further, ensure the protection of all endangered species financially. Create a global understanding how much humankind's survival depends on sustainable use and protection of planet's ecosystems. So everybody must be aware of the criticality of our dependence on all of these living forms. Create alternative income for people who depend on the exploitation of land ecosystems. Well, traditionally there are like a cultures, societies, and tribe, tribal, like who are dependent on forest, and they have been using it for a long time. Okay, so in a way it's their right even to use it now, but in the renewed context, definitely we can like motivate them, or create some alternate like methods and ways to like earn their livelihood in order to save like these local species, right? So that's what we are talking here. Yeah, so what does it mean for the global like a north? If you see, well, it's a very humble like a honeybee here in this picture, is like you may have read like some research papers, some articles, and this news that this honeybee is so critical for the like survival of like our own agriculture and plantation and flowering and like crops and all of these like systems, basically our food like a system. that if this species actually goes extinct, our agriculture will come to a halt. Okay, that much is the criticality of like one species of like these bees, these insect, right? They are so like important for our survival, right? So many places actually there is a like a extinction, or like a it is recorded that their numbers is falling down drastically, right? Directly it poses like a existential like a threat to the human society. So let me read this for you. In most of the countries in the global north, only few places are still untouched wilderness, as most ecosystems are used for food production and the extraction of resources. Paradoxically, the highest biodiversity is found in urban gardens, and most encounters with big predators happen in zoos. Especially, urban residents experience a growing disconnection from wilderness, leading to bizarre effects. Even though urban citizens are concerned about messages on the extinction of important insect species, on wildfires and storms that destroy forest, and on vast degradation of fertile soil, they usually struggle to realize the connection of their lifestyle and a growing rate of environmental degradation. Moreover, people are scared hearing about the wolves come back in rural areas, or about growing numbers of raccoons, foxes, and boars living in their urban neighborhood. The new urban animals trigger old situations and challenge the perception of nature in the global north. Despite the age of growing urbanization and biodiversity crisis, nature is still conceptualized as a romantic place that people long for. This conception can be helpful, as in Germany, people feel strongly about nature conservation and expect their government to act. 69% of German citizens strongly agree that nature is important for a good life. They also feel closely tied with the nature of their region, while 51% do not feel threatened by the destruction of the nature in Germany. 65% fear that there will not be any intact nature left for their children or grandchildren. Against this backdrop, the German government acknowledges in its German National Strategy for Sustainable Development that intact ecosystems are crucial for a sustainable development and human existence on Earth. Politicians have introduced agendas to protect biodiversity and to enlarge nature conservation areas and create measures for the sustainable cultivation of German forest and rank soil. However, the limits of the governmental consistency become evident in the practical implementation. As for example, once the aim to reduce soil sealing appeared to fail, it was shortly prolonged for 10 years from 2020 to 2030. So you see, this underlines like the importance and some after effects, since there is loss of like a forest cover. Okay, some of the wild animals are moving towards like urban areas and stuff. So there is so much kind of imbalance kind of thing which is happening. Another example, for the like a global south, what does it SDG 15 means for global south. So let's see this. This is like a picture from Masai Mara. Like this Masai is a tribe. They have been the traditional hunter gatherers from on this land for like several like hundreds and thousands of years. Their forefathers have inhabited, and they have lived in sync with this wildlife and nature for a long time, all of this time. Many countries of the global south are known for their rich biodiversity in plants and wildlife. Some countries are home for big mammals like gorillas, elephants, rhinos, or several species of big cats. In some cases, they are national symbols. Lush and biodiverse tropical rainforests cover the area of many equatorial countries in the global south. Economically seen, this high level of biodiversity is a precious resource. From the ecological perspective, it is crucial for the planet and its ecosystems to survive. However, the intensified extraction of natural resources to satisfy the constantly increasing global demand often leads to the destruction, pollution, and contamination of precious nature habitat. Not to mention the labor conditions and dependency relations that are thereby often upheld. The export of these natural resources, however, is also crucial to enhance economic development, fight poverty and hunger, and tackle economical, educational, and health issues. This sustainability dilemma of natural resource extraction is complemented by the agricultural sector. Farming methods are intensified and land is expanded in order to enhance economic development, leading to massive stress for many ecosystems. So that is the condition in the global south. So the question is, are we experiencing a new wave of wildlife mass extinction on our planet? Because there has been, like episodes, you may be aware, like there are, like ice ages, right? It comes in like a cyclic fashion, it comes and goes and all of that. It drives, like a mass extinction. Then again on its revival, like several, like species actually revive or new ones actually come back, right? But there have never been, like a an instance where, like one species of humans, has driven, like other species to their extinction at such a rate. Okay, so that is, definitely unprecedented and, first time happening in the planet's, like existence. So here the current loss of biodiversity is a serious and alarming issue. However, the scientific proof of the extent shows to be highly complex, leading to a variety of methods analyzing biodiversity loss. In any case, scientists seem to agree that we experienced a dramatic loss rate of species and or individuals in the last decades. In its long history, our planet faced 5 big events that caused mass extinction of wildlife triggered by volcanic events, global cooling and meteor strikes. So these used to have been the, like a major events, for driving extinction. Will human activity cause the next big event? Is the kind of, like a consideration going on, because already human society, like if not all but some of them, like society, some of the countries and, like communities, they have done, like a biggest harm. Many scientists conclude the evidence is incontrovertible that recent extinction rates are unprecedented in human history. This could be the initiation of sixth mass extinction, whose dramatic consequences though could still be avoided through immediate strong conservation efforts. So you can see another, like a round of, like a extinction. It looks like it has begun, in human, under, like a human influence, but there is still time that it can be, like reversed. So what can be done, about it? What can be improved, on this? I can, as a private, like a person, volunteer in a garden initiative to improve biodiversity in my surroundings, donate money to wildlife organizations for betterment, plant trees and use Ecosia instead of Google as my search engine. This is also one of them, like things you can do, and another, like a search engine, alternate search engine of, compared to Google. Ecosia, maybe you make a search and if you can use it. Reconnect with nature and promote its values. Buy organic food from local farmers. Well, to increase my handprint, I can start an urban gardening initiative in my area, so that, my green handprints, will increase. Promote sustainable agriculture in my community. Address companies and demand from them to support and establish sustainability programs for wildlife. Engage in politics and start lobbying for nature conservation. So this also you can do wherever you are, in whatever capacity. You must, advocate for this. For more details, you can refer sustainabledevelopment.un or IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. And along with that, you can refer, like these websites also, handprint.in, handprint.de, for more information about volunteering and being part of, like these organizations. Like IUCN works, for the conservation of nature. LPI index. What is LPI? Living Planet Index. Okay, so you see the, like listens, new species by yellow, new populations by red, and existing data by green. So how to read this LPI index? In 2020, LPI shows an average rate of decline in population size of 68% between 1970 to 2016. LPI now tracks the abundance of almost 21,000 populations of mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. The LPI includes data for threatened and non-threatened species. If it is monitored consistently over time, it goes in. Species and population in the LPI are increasing, declining, or stable. About half of the species in LPI show an average decline in population size. Well, what it doesn't tell, the LPI doesn't show numbers of species lost or extinction. It does not mean that X% of species or populations are declining, or the X% of populations or individuals have been lost. So you can see, like these locations on this map, So green ones, existing data, new populations by red, some new populations you can see here in the Indian like subcontinent, also mostly in India. There are lots of greens, few reds and a few yellows. Okay, a lot of yellows in the western Russia and a lot of reds and yellows in the southern Europe and yeah, in the west coast US and partly here on Massachusetts side. Yeah, and yeah, South Africa, more yellows and reds the south of Australia and Japan, Koreas also. A beautiful frog. So LPI is one indicator among many showing severe declines or changes in the recent decades. Okay, so you can see this abundance. The LPI measures the population abundance of thousands of vertebrate species around the world. Other indices measure different things or have broader taxonomic breadth, giving us different information about how biodiversity is responding to human pressure. And here the IUCN red list, like index, extinction risk, you can see here. Humans have driven at least 680 species of vertebrates, the best studied taxonomic group, to extinction since year 1500. This equates to 1% of species in this group. Many other species are now at elevated risk of extinction owing to human impacts. The IUCN Red List represents the most comprehensive and objective system for assessing the relative risk of extinction of species. Over 1 lakh species have now been evaluated using information on life history rates. Next, on composition, community composition, the mean species abundance index and biodiversity intactness index. Species distribution, habitat index. Species distribution are dynamic by nature with local populations constantly adapting to environment. The magnitude of these dynamics has, however, been greatly altered by human pressure. So you can see these graphs over here. Which talks about index value of 1 in year 1970 to 2016. There is a loss of 68%, minus 68%. We are seeing this figure. Between this, these years, the percentage change in the index doesn't represent the number of individuals animal lost, but reflects the average proportional change in the animal population sizes tracked over 46 years. In distribution, species habitat index, if you see from 1, this has come down to 0.98. Okay, observed or model habitat change between year 2000 and 2018. So under a range of around 17-18 years, it has fallen by 2%. 2% loss, indicating a strong and general downward trend in habitat available to species. For select regions and species, SH1 decrease is much steeper. Yeah, red list index, if you see, extinction risk, so red list index of species survival on this side and decades on this side, 1970 to year 2020. So a span of around 50 years. You can see how fast like a certain species have declined. So corals, extremely fast. You see this has almost come down at a rate of at an angle of around 45 degrees, right? Then we have, I think, all of these are coming down slowly. Cycads, amphibians, mammals, birds, they are all gradually coming down. Biodiversity intactness index, in this one, composition, you can see this dark green is the global figure, which is drastically coming down. The biggest loss has happened in the Asia Pacific, and in that I think the minimal loss has happened in Americas. Global average is this one. So threats to nature and the drivers and pressures behind them. So as we see, like these numbers are declining. So what are the direct threats? So some indirect drivers, if you see, large consumption of resources, demographics, institutions, governance, economic, technology, conflicts, epidemics. They are causing pressures and a lot of other like human activities like fisheries, agriculture, energy, mining, infrastructure, forestry, tourism, etc., which in turn is driving like many things like direct drivers are listed over here. Loss of natural habitat, overexploitation, climate change, pollution, invasive species. Then lastly we have like a biodiversity impact. So several species and ecosystem, they are all at the like verge of damages, like severe damages. So this is the like a threat we are seeing. Mapping the last wilderness areas on earth. How do you map? So again technology comes to the rescue, and mainly from like satellites. So satellite technology allows us to visualize how the earth is changing in real time. Human footprint mapping then shows where we are and are not impacting land on earth. The latest map reveals that just a handful of countries, Russia, Canada, Brazil, Australia, etc., but more also can be seen now. Maybe you can check again for new set of such data. So this is an assessment which shows like this correlation. The broad methodological framework used to create a map of cumulative human pressure adopted from Watson and Wenger. So you can see like all of these are the actually human pressures, and that is leading to like a huge pressure from humanity, and there are like results. So if you see this graphic, damaged is represented by like a reds, and intact light green, wilderness dark green. So you can see like a portion of Canada, like and north of Russia, like Siberian region, and Tibet, here, and sub-Saharan Africa, and parts of Amazon, in Brazil and in other countries, even in Chile here slightly green I see, and central middle Australia. Okay, so these are having like a greens. Rest of the countries, rest of the regions of the world, if you see, that has fallen into the like a red trap. So drivers of change, we saw some more like a potential negative impacts of fishing, for example, overexploitation, bycatch of non-target species, seafloor habitat destruction from seafloor trawling, illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing, gathering of organisms for aquarium trade, etc. Overall, for climate change, warming waters, ocean acidification, desertification, etc., increased oxygen minimum zones, more frequent extreme events, change in oceanic currents, land-based population, nutrient runoff, contaminants such as heavy metals, micro and macroplastics, ocean-based pollution, waste disposal, fuel leaks, damaging from ships, oil spills, noise, coastal development, destruction of habitat, increased pressure on local shoreline, increased pollution and waste, invasive alien species. Invasive species accidentally introduced, more climate-driven invasions likely. Offshore infrastructure, physical disturbance of the seaboard, creation of habitat structure, shipping, vessel strikes, like damages to the coral reefs, etc., pollution and oil spills, etc. Plus sometimes they carry alien species from one part to the other, that also becomes a problem. Mariculture, physical presence of aquaculture facilities, deep sea mining. Examples of consequences you can see here on the right side. And yeah, our livelihoods on the first column, food security and resilience. So these things are domesticated, whether these are crops or like a domestic animals, pet animals, etc. They are now domesticated and they like living next to the human society. Well, this is essential for like a food security. Here for terrestrial plants, terrestrial animals, aquatic animals and plants, microorganisms and fungi, etc. Right? And resilience, over 1160 wild plant species use food by humans. At least 2111 insects, 600 birds, 1110 mammals, 140 reptile and 230 amphibian species eaten by humans. Over 1800 species of fish, crustaceans, mollusks, echinoderms, coleopteras and aquatic plants harvested by global capture fisheries. 10 species group account for 28% of like a such kind of production. 1154 species and genera of edible wild mushrooms. Okay. Yeah, indirect biodiversity that creates the conditions for food production. So if biodiversity is maintained, all of the rest of the things will be maintained. One nice soothing image for you. You can see there is this crane flying at the top. Another picture, from Arctic or Antarctic region, like polar regions, or maybe like a glacial lake. From places you can see the glacier. These are the high mountains. From there, this like a glacier is moving down, and we have like this water, freshly melted water. So what are the challenges in this case? If you see, recommended, suggested by UN Environment, every minute, like we saw, 23 hectare of arable, 23 billion hectares of, like a land, is getting lost, and that is translated to every minute 23 hectares of land. Okay, so that 3 billion, like a land, like hectare land, what we saw initially, that is, getting lost at the rate of 23 hectares, per minute. Okay, that is the rate at which this loss is happening. During a span of 1 hour of this, like a class, 23 multiplied by like a 60, like hectares of land, we have lost, during this one session. That is the like rate at which this degradation is taking place. Solution: combat desertification, restore degraded land and soil. Every year we lose 13 million hectares of forest that are home to more than 80% of all land-based species and provide livelihood to 1.6 billion people. All deforestation restores degraded forest to protect habitats. The world is losing its precious biodiversity at an alarming rate, pushing 22% of animals to the brink of extinction. For some selfish, like weird reasons. Take urgent action to end poaching and trafficking of protected species and even all the species. So now we have understood, the importance of like a life on land and how it is crucial, for our own survival and existence. So I'm sure like you have now got the like lessons from this. Look in your vicinity, and perhaps you can plan like maybe a small assignment or an exercise based on this, and maybe you can contribute from your end. So with this, we have come to the end of this session. Thank you all for joining. See you in the next one.